11:49 p.m., July 15, Oceanfront Villa, Key West. Betty Johnson Carter's lungs burned as her husband's powerful hands held her underwater. The 69-year-old judge's wedding ring gleamed beneath moonlight as he drowned his 23-year-old wife. Would you recognize the warning signs if someone you loved was capable of murder? If you haven't joined the Guilty Whispers community yet, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to become part of our growing family of true crime enthusiasts. Share your location in the comments below. We love seeing how our stories connect people across the world. 12:02 a.m., Judge Victor Carter dragged his young wife's lifeless body from the infinity pool, leaving a trail of water across the imported marble tiles. His judicial mind, sharp from 40 years of sending criminals to prison, now calculated each move with cold precision. He arranged Betty's slender form on the pool deck, positioning champagne bottles nearby to suggest a drunken late-night swim gone wrong. The moonlight cast long shadows across the luxury villa as Victor paced, the sound of his expensive Italian leather shoes echoing in the silence. "You shouldn't have betrayed me," he whispered to the body, water still dripping from her elaborate braids. "You were mine." For a man known as the Hammer throughout Miami's legal community, a man who had sentenced dozens to death row without flinching, this moment should have brought some emotional response. Yet as he carefully arranged the scene, his face remained as impassive as it did on the bench. Only the slight tremor in his hands revealed any humanity as he checked his Rolex, a watch worth more than what Betty's mother made in a year. A strategic wait was necessary. Too quick a discovery would raise suspicions. He would call his daughter Priscilla first, then emergency services. Victor Carter knew the system better than anyone. He would use it to his advantage one final time. But how had it come to this? How had Miami's most respected judge become the very criminal he had spent decades condemning? 2 years earlier, Betty Johnson had been nothing more than a newly hired paralegal, nervously straightening her discount blazer before entering Judge Carter's courtroom for the first time. Her colleagues had warned her about him, his exacting standards, his merciless sentencing, his intimidating presence. What they hadn't warned her about was his immediate interest in the beautiful young woman now working in his courtroom. Their first interaction had been ordinary enough. Betty dropping a stack of case files, papers scattering across the polished floor. Victor, surprising his staff with unexpected gallantry, helping to collect them. Their fingers brushed, his weathered and powerful, hers young and delicate. Something electric passed between them, something that made Betty both uncomfortable and intrigued. Despite a 46-year age difference, Victor Carter had made his intentions clear from that moment. "You have potential, Miss Johnson," he had said later that week, keeping her late to discuss a case. "I could mentor you. Help you understand the law in ways your community college courses never could." What began as late-night discussions in his chambers soon evolved into dinners at exclusive Miami restaurants where Betty felt awkwardly underdressed. She'd never seen $50 cocktails before, never tasted $500 bottles of wine. The judge was introducing her to a world she had only glimpsed through celebrity social media accounts. "I don't understand what you see in him," her mother had said when Betty revealed they were dating. "He's older than your grandfather would be." But Betty understood exactly what she was doing. Each photo she posted of their outings gained her hundreds of new followers. The expensive gifts, designer clothes, jewelry, eventually a car, transformed her image. The girl from the struggling neighborhood was becoming someone who mattered. Someone who had influence. Someone with a future. Victor proposed after just 4 months, presenting a diamond ring that caught the light so brilliantly it almost blinded her when she opened the velvet box. Betty had hesitated only briefly. The ring represented security, status, and an escape from the financial struggles that had defined her childhood. "She's younger than I am," Priscilla had shouted at her father when he announced the engagement. At 37, the successful prosecutor felt humiliated by her father's choice. "Have you lost your mind? What will people think?" "I don't care what people think," Victor had responded coldly. I've earned this happiness. Their wedding made the front page of Miami's society pages. Betty in a designer gown, Victor distinguished in his tuxedo. The 46-year age gap created exactly the buzz Betty had hoped for. Her social media following tripled overnight as she rebranded herself as a legal fashion influencer, posting carefully curated glimpses into the life of a judge's young wife. After marriage, Betty left her paralegal position, focusing entirely on building her social media presence and influencer career. But behind the filtered photos, the reality was darkening quickly. The controlling behavior began during their honeymoon in Santorini. Victor monitoring her phone calls, questioning who she texted, dictating appropriate times for posting on social media. "You're a judge's wife now," he had reminded her repeatedly. "Everything you do reflects on me." Within 6 months, Betty felt more like a defendant than a wife. Victor installed tracking software on her phone for her safety. He vetoed friendships, controlled her schedule, and once, during a charity gala, gripped her wrist so hard it left marks when she spent too long talking to a younger attorney. When a modeling agency approached Betty about representing their legal fashion line, Victor's response had been immediate and final. "Absolutely not. No wife of mine will be photographed by strange men. What would my colleagues think?" That night had been their first serious fight, with Betty throwing her wedding ring across their bedroom. "I'm not your property. I had dreams before I met you." Victor's response had been chillingly calm. "You signed a prenuptial agreement, Betty. If you leave, you get nothing. No house, no car, no jewelry, no alimony. How many followers would you have then? How many people would care about Betty Johnson from the poor side of town?" It was the truth, and Betty knew it. Her lawyer had confirmed it when she secretly consulted him about divorce options. Her social media success depended entirely on the lifestyle Victor provided. Without him, she would lose everything, including her 300,000 followers who lived vicariously through her posts. So she maintained the facade, posting happy couple photos while secretly messaging friends about feeling trapped. Planning her eventual escape while playing the devoted wife. Looking for any opportunity to build independent connections that might help her when she finally left. The anniversary trip to Key West had been Victor's idea. 2 years, he had announced over breakfast one morning. "We should celebrate properly. I've booked us a private villa." Betty had seen the opportunity immediately. A luxury resort meant networking possibilities, connections outside Victor's reach, perhaps even modeling contacts who vacationed there. While Victor viewed the trip as a chance to isolate her further, Betty saw it as possible freedom. The tension during their drive down to Key West had been palpable. Victor lecturing her about appropriate resort attire. Betty pretending to listen while secretly messaging friends. 2 days of freedom coming up. 10:15 a.m., July 13th. They had arrived at the exclusive oceanfront villa with its infinity pool overlooking the Gulf of Mexico. Betty had barely contained her excitement seeing the resort facilities visible from their private deck, the fitness center, the multiple pools, the restaurants and bars where people her age gathered. "Remember," Victor had said, unpacking his carefully pressed linen shirts, "this trip is to fix what's broken between us." Betty had nodded dutifully while calculating how many activities she could enjoy while Victor took his afternoon naps. Have you ever felt trapped in a relationship that looked perfect from the outside? Tell us in the comments below if you've experienced the difference between public perception and private reality. 8:17 a.m., July 14th. Betty slipped out of the villa while Victor slept, feeling the warm morning air against her skin like a caress of freedom. The sensation of walking alone, without Victor's possessive hand at her lower back, was intoxicating. She headed straight for the resort fitness center, signing up for the morning beach yoga class. That's where she first saw Elijah Wright. Tall, athletic, with a confident smile that reached his eyes, something Betty realized she hadn't seen in Victor's expression for months. As the fitness trainer moved through the room correcting poses, Betty felt her heart beat faster when he approached. "You're carrying tension in your shoulders," he said, his hands gently adjusting her position. The touch lingered just seconds longer than necessary, his voice lowering. "First time in Key West?" "Anniversary trip," Betty replied, not mentioning her husband's age or occupation. "Then you definitely need to relax," Elijah smiled. "I'm leading a beach workout at 10. You should join us." Betty's phone interrupted the moment, Victor's name flashing on screen. She declined the call, something she rarely dared to do. "Is that the anniversary culprit?" Elijah asked. "Yes," Betty said, making a decision. "And he can wait. I'll see you at 10 on the beach." Victor's voice was tight with controlled anger when he called again minutes later. "Where are you? You didn't leave a note." "Just getting some exercise," Betty replied casually. "Don't worry about me. I expect you back by noon," Victor stated rather than asked. "We have lunch reservations." But Betty stayed for Elijah's beach class anyway, enjoying the way his eyes kept finding hers, the way he used her as a demonstration model for the group, his hands respectfully but noticeably appreciative of her form. For the first time in months, Betty felt desirable. Not as an accessory or status symbol, but as herself. 7:32 p.m. Victor insisted they dine privately at the villa that evening, rejecting Betty's suggestion of trying the resort seafood restaurant. The private chef he'd arranged prepared an elaborate meal, the smell of expensive wine mingling with the tension in the air. Betty sipped her Bordeaux while scrolling through her phone, purposely ignoring Victor's attempts at conversation. She posted an Instagram story of the sunset from their deck, not realizing until too late that Elijah could be seen leading a beachfront meditation class in the background. Victor's fingers tightened around his fork as he noticed the muscular young man in her video. "Who is that?" Betty's dismissal was casual. "Just some trainer at the resort." "Elijah something. He teaches fitness classes." She watched Victor excuse himself from the table, his hushed voice carrying from the hallway as he called the resort management. "This is Judge Victor Carter. I'm in the oceanfront villa. I want that fitness staff member, Elijah. Kept away from my wife." "No, this isn't a request. Make it happen." Betty pretended not to have heard when he returned, but inside she seethed with humiliation and rage. The control, always the control. She added another mental tally to reasons for leaving him once she figured out how to keep some of what she'd gained. 10:44 a.m., July 15th. During the morning stretch class, Elijah found a moment when the other participants were distracted to slip Betty a folded note. The warmth of his handwritten phone number in her palm felt like a secret rebellion. She tucked it carefully into her sports bra, away from Victor's prying eyes. Later, while Victor napped, Betty texted Elijah from the bathroom, water running to mask any notification sounds. "My husband had you reported to management," she wrote. "I'm so embarrassed." "Not your fault," came his quick reply. "Happens more than you'd think. Older guys, beautiful young wives, they get insecure." Their exchange grew increasingly intimate over the next hour. "My marriage is a prison with gilded bars," Betty confessed. "His money and status are the only things keeping me there." "Life's too short," Elijah responded. "Some of the staff are having a pool party tonight. Private area, management won't know. You should come. 9 p.m. at the North Pool." Betty calculated quickly. Victor had taken a sleeping pill the previous night. She could claim a ladies-only spa evening, and he'd likely be unconscious by 8:30. "I'll be there," she promised. That afternoon, Betty laid the groundwork carefully. "Some women I met at yoga are doing a spa night," she mentioned casually. "Face masks, girl talk. Might be good for me to network." Victor seemed to accept the excuse, though his eyes narrowed slightly. "Be back by midnight. And keep your location services on." Of course, Betty agreed, already planning to leave her phone in the resort spa temporarily to create the right digital footprint while she borrowed a friend's phone for the evening. 9:03 p.m. Betty arrived at the vibrant, music-filled North Pool area, heart racing with nervous excitement. She slipped off her casual dress to reveal the bikini beneath, one Victor had deemed inappropriate earlier in the trip. The liberation of making her own choices, even in something as simple as swimwear, felt intoxicating. The night air caressed her skin as the scent of saltwater and tropical flowers enveloped her. Colored lights reflected off the pool surface, casting rainbow patterns across the faces of guests much closer to her age. For the first time in months, Betty felt she belonged somewhere. Elijah waited by a private cabana, his eyes appreciative as she approached. "You made it," he smiled, handing her a glass of champagne. Their fingers touched as the glass passed between them, lingering too long to be accidental. Betty noticed the warmth of his skin, so different from Victor's perpetually cool touch. To freedom, Betty toasted, taking a deep sip and feeling the bubbles match the effervescence in her chest. The champagne tasted different here, lighter, sweeter, without Victor's lecture about vintages and appropriate appreciation. As the night progressed, their bodies moved closer. Dancing to the music, sharing whispered conversations, their hands finding excuses to touch. The bass from the music vibrated through the wooden deck beneath her feet, matching her heartbeat as Elijah's hand found the small of her back. Betty felt young again, actually young, not the carefully managed, trophy wife role she played in Miami. "You're incredible," Elijah whispered against her ear, his breath warm. "How did someone like him ever deserve you?" The question lingered between them, heavy with implication. Betty didn't answer with words. Instead, she turned her face toward his, their lips meeting in a kiss that tasted of champagne and possibility. In a moment of reckless joy, she borrowed a friend's phone to post an Instagram story of the party atmosphere, forgetting that her distinctive bangles and manicure would be recognizable to anyone who knew her well. Even more dangerously, she hadn't noticed that the reflection in her designer sunglasses, worn as a headband, clearly showed Elijah's face as he leaned in close behind her. A comment appeared almost immediately from a mutual Miami acquaintance, "Does the judge know where you are?" Betty deleted the comment quickly, but the damage was done. The story remained up, viewable by anyone, including Victor, if he happened to check her account. 11:13 p.m. Back at the villa, Victor scrolled through Betty's social media while waiting for her return. He had indeed seen the post before she deleted the comment. His judicial calm masked growing rage as he recognized the unfamiliar pool area in the background, definitely not the resort spa. Years of dealing with liars in his courtroom had given Victor an instinct for deception. Betty was not where she claimed to be. With cold efficiency, he called the head of resort security, a former police officer who owed his career to Victor's judicial connections. "I need access to your security camera feeds," he said without preamble. "My wife's safety may be at risk." Within minutes, Victor was watching live footage of the North Pool on his laptop. The camera zoomed in on Betty dancing intimately with the fitness trainer, their bodies pressed close together. Another angle captured them entering a private cabana, emerging 20 minutes later looking disheveled. Victor downloaded several clear images to his phone, documentation of her betrayal. Evidence, as he thought of it. In his courtroom, evidence determined outcomes. Tonight would be no different. His text message to Betty was simple: "I have a special anniversary surprise waiting." Ever had that moment when you knew someone was watching you? Share in the comments below if you've ever had that sixth sense that something wasn't right. 11:27 p.m. Victor moved through the darkened villa with purpose, preparing the infinity pool area with meticulous attention to detail. Champagne chilling in an ice bucket. 2 crystal glasses arranged perfectly on the table. Rose petals creating a path from the entrance to the poolside. He scrolled through the security photos again, selecting which ones to show Betty. The intimate dance. The kiss in the cabana. her laughing with the younger man's arm around her waist. His judicial mind, trained by decades of courtroom strategy, considered every angle of what would happen next. There was irony in this moment, a man known for harsh punishments now contemplating his own crime. But in Victor's mind, this wasn't crime. This was justice. She had violated their contract, their marriage. And Judge Victor Carter had always ensured that those who broke the law paid the appropriate price. Betty's text arrived, coming back soon. Don't wait up. Victor replied with calculated warmth, I have a surprise for our anniversary. The sound of his knuckles cracking echoed in the night air as he took position in a lounge chair, partially shadowed, waiting for his wife to return. 11:38 p.m. Betty entered the darkened villa nervously, the scent of her perfume mixed with champagne and chlorine announcing her presence before she spoke. Her hand instinctively checked her appearance in the entrance mirror, adjusting her casual dress to hide any evidence of her evening activities. Following the rose petals, she found Victor seated calmly by the illuminated pool, 2 champagne glasses waiting. His unnervingly pleasant demeanor immediately sent warning signals through her body. You look flushed, Victor observed, his voice deceptively gentle. Had an active evening? The spa was hot, Betty lied, taking the seat across from him. Steam rooms, you know. The moonlight reflecting off the infinity pool created dancing patterns across their faces, casting eerie shadows that made Victor's features look hollow and mask-like. 11:42 p.m. Victor poured champagne with steady hands, asking casual questions about her spa night, while Betty maintained her fabrication, describing facial treatments and female bonding in convincing detail. Years of performing on social media had made her an excellent actress. To honesty in marriage, Victor toasted, his eyes never leaving hers. The quiet click of his phone being unlocked broke the night's stillness. Without warning, he turned the screen toward Betty, showing the first damning photo of her dancing with Elijah, bodies pressed close together. Her face, illuminated by the blue light of the phone screen, froze in shock. You had me followed? I don't need to follow you, Victor replied, scrolling methodically through more evidence. Your bracelet reflected his face in your sunglasses. Careless, Betty. Very careless. Betty's strategy shifted from denial to defiance in an instant. Fine. So what? I'm 23 years old, Victor. I should be dancing and having fun, not playing nurse to a man who'll be 70 next month. She stood abruptly, champagne sloshing from her glass. I want a divorce. You can keep your money and your precious reputation. I can't do this anymore. With a dramatic gesture, she threw the remaining champagne in his face. I'd rather be poor than your prisoner for another day. 11:47 p.m. Victor calmly wiped the expensive champagne from his face with a monogrammed handkerchief. His voice remained steady, showing none of the rage boiling beneath. Let's cool off in the pool before making any rash decisions, he suggested. The water might clear our heads. Betty hesitated but eventually stepped into the shallow end, keeping significant distance between them. The infinity pool's edge blended seamlessly with the ocean beyond, creating the illusion of water extending forever into darkness. You know a divorce would destroy everything you've built, Victor said conversationally as they waded deeper. Your followers don't care about Betty Johnson. They care about Betty Carter, the judge's wife with access to luxury they can only dream about. I'll figure something out, Betty replied, her back to the drop-off, placing her in a vulnerable position without realizing it. You cheated on me, Victor said, voice suddenly hard. In my courtroom, actions have consequences. His movement was surprisingly swift for a man his age. Powerful hands gripped Betty's shoulders before she could react, forcing her backward and down. The momentary look of realization in her eyes, understanding exactly what was happening, gave Victor a satisfaction that disturbed even him. 11:49 p.m. Betty Johnson Carter fought desperately as her husband's powerful hands held her underwater. The 69-year-old judge's wedding ring gleamed beneath moonlight as he drowned his 23-year-old wife. On his phone screen, still visible on the pool deck, photos of Betty kissing the resort trainer just 30 minutes earlier. Her struggle was fierce but brief. Victor's strength, honed by daily swims and tennis matches with younger colleagues, proved sufficient for the task. He watched dispassionately as her resistance weakened, bubbles slowing, then stopping altogether. 12:01 a.m., July 16. Victor stood at the pool's edge, catching his breath, the Gulf of Mexico a vast darkness beyond the infinity edge. The night's stillness felt absolute, broken only by gentle waves against the shore below the villa. With methodical precision, he pulled Betty's body from the water, arranging her on the pool deck. Champagne bottles were positioned to suggest excessive drinking. Her phone placed carefully nearby, open to her photo gallery showing the evening's party scenes. Evidence of her state of mind before the accident. In the bathroom mirror, Victor rehearsed his distressed discovery expression. Too much shock looked fake. Too little seemed suspicious. He had sentenced enough murderers to know exactly how innocent concern should appear. At 12:15 a.m., he called his daughter. Priscilla, his voice broke convincingly. Something terrible has happened. I need you here. Family first, then authorities, it would seem more natural that way. The clock showed 12:17 a.m. when he finally dialed emergency services, voice cracking on cue, my wife. I think she's drowned. 12:38 a.m. Paramedics pronounced Betty dead at the scene, the flash of police cameras illuminating the luxury villa in rhythmic bursts of harsh light. Victor performed grief with convincing skill, his voice breaking at appropriate moments, his hands trembling just enough. But the first responding officer noticed inconsistencies immediately. Victor's clothes were completely dry despite his claim of trying to rescue Betty from the pool. The champagne bottles seemed too perfectly arranged. The rose petals leading to the pool suggested premeditation rather than spontaneous late-night swimming. When Priscilla arrived 30 minutes later, her efficiency in supporting her father seemed almost rehearsed. As a prosecutor herself, she moved through the scene with professional detachment, speaking quietly with officers, managing the situation. But her eyes narrowed at certain details, the dry towels nearby, the position of the body, the perfectly maintained crime scene. The responding officer made a call. This is Officer Rawlings at Sunset Key, Oceanfront Villa. We need Detective Elvis Jackson here. It's Judge Carter's wife. She's dead, and something doesn't add up. How often do you think powerful people get away with crimes because of their status? Would you like to see more stories about justice catching up to those who think they're above the law? Subscribe to our channel for more stories where privilege meets justice. 3:15 a.m. Detective Elvis Jackson conducted his initial interview with Victor at the villa, the judge now wrapped in an expensive robe, looking appropriately devastated but remarkably composed for a man whose wife had just died. The detective noticed immediately how the judge controlled the space, sitting behind an antique desk in the villa's study like it was his courtroom. Old habits of authority died hard. The faint scent of chlorine still clung to the room despite the heavy application of expensive cologne. Walk me through it again, Judge, Jackson requested, his tone respectful but persistent. You were both drinking champagne, decided to swim, and you went inside to take a call? From my clerk, Victor nodded, maintaining perfect eye contact, another sign that made Jackson suspicious. Most grieving spouses couldn't maintain such composure. Urgent case matter. Couldn't have been more than 5 minutes. When I came back out. His voice trailed off with practiced grief. Jackson glanced at the framed photos on the desk, Victor and Betty on their wedding day, the age difference stark in the harsh camera flash. Betty's smile seemed genuine enough, but her eyes held something Jackson recognized from years of detective work, calculation. This had been a transactional relationship from the beginning. What was your wife's state of mind lately, Judge Carter? Jackson asked, watching closely for micro-expressions. Happy, Victor replied too quickly. We were celebrating our anniversary. 2 years, Jackson nodded. That's paper, right? Traditional gift would be paper? I gave her a first edition Austen, Victor replied. She loves classic literature. Jackson made a note. Betty's social media, which he'd reviewed before arriving, showed no interest in classic literature. Only fashion, luxury travel, and legal influencer content. Another inconsistency. Mind if I see your phone, Judge? Standard procedure to verify the timeline. Victor hesitated fractionally before handing it over, his knuckles widening slightly as he released it. Of course, Detective. Whatever you need. Jackson's tech team quickly discovered recently deleted texts between Betty and Elijah, along with downloaded security footage Victor thought he had erased. But digital footprints were nearly impossible to eliminate completely, something Judge Carter, for all his legal knowledge, had failed to appreciate. 7:20 a.m. Elijah Wright sat in the resort security office, hands shaking as he gave his statement. We were just dancing, talking. Nothing serious. When Jackson showed him the cabana footage, Elijah's resistance crumbled. Okay, we kissed. She was unhappy. Said her husband controlled everything. Her phone, her friends, her whole life. She was planning to leave him. Did she seem afraid of him? Jackson asked. Elijah looked down. She said once that he had a terrifying calm when angry. That it scared her more than if he'd yelled. Resort staff came forward throughout the morning, revealing Victor's threatening calls about Betty, his demands that certain staff be kept away from her, his request for access to security cameras. 10:30 a.m. The medical examiner's preliminary findings raised immediate red flags. These bruising patterns on her shoulders aren't consistent with accidental drowning, she explained, showing Jackson the distinctive marks. These are compression bruises from someone holding her down. The victim was forcibly drowned. Betty's phone revealed tracking software installed without her knowledge, monitoring her location, messages, and calls. Friends from Miami began calling police voluntarily, describing Victor's controlling behavior over the past 2 years. He once grabbed her arm so hard at a charity event it left marks, one friend reported. She always laughed it off, but we could tell she was scared. 4:45 p.m. In the villa's office, Priscilla discovered her father's laptop still open to the resort security system. Scrolling through his downloads folder, she found the deleted footage from the North Pool, along with a folder labeled Betty, Evidence, containing screenshots of private messages and tracked locations. Her legal mind processed what she was seeing with growing horror. This wasn't spontaneous rage. This was premeditated murder by the man who had taught her justice. Her fingers trembled as she dialed Detective Jackson's number. I found something you need to see, she said quietly. And I can't live with hiding it. 8:17 p.m., July 17th. Detective Jackson arrived at the Carter estate in Miami, the grand entryway with its marble columns reflecting Victor's position in society. The judge sat confidently in his study, believing the initial investigation had accepted the accidental drowning theory. His shock was complete when Priscilla entered alongside the detectives, a flash drive in her hand containing the evidence she'd discovered. Victor Carter, you're under arrest for the murder of Betty Johnson Carter, Jackson announced formally. The cold metal of handcuffs against Victor's wrists seemed to finally break through his judicial calm. This is a mistake, he insisted, authority still evident in his voice. No, Father, Priscilla replied quietly. You made the mistake. You taught me that justice matters more than anything, even family. The media frenzy erupted immediately as the Hammer was led from his home in handcuffs. Former defendants he'd sentenced gathered outside the police station, some openly celebrating his downfall. At the press conference, Betty's mother collapsed upon hearing the details, supported by family members. Through tears, she addressed the cameras, "I warned her about men like him. Men who don't love you, they own you." 9 a.m., March 3, 2024. Victor entered the courtroom in Prison Orange, the irony lost on no one that he now sat at the defendant table in the very courthouse where he had presided for decades. Despite his attorney's strong objections, he had insisted on representing himself. "No one knows the law better than I do," he had stated flatly. The evidence presented was overwhelming. Security footage, bruise patterns, witness testimony about his controlling behavior, digital evidence from his own devices showing premeditation. In his final statement to the court, Victor remained unrepentant. "She betrayed not just me, but everything I represent. My position. My reputation. My trust. In this very courtroom, I have sentenced people for less." The jury deliberated just 3 hours before returning a guilty verdict. The sentencing judge, a former colleague, showed no leniency. "You've shown the same lack of mercy you displayed on the bench, Judge Carter. The court sentences you to life imprisonment without possibility of parole." In a moment of poetic justice, the bailiff who led Victor away was a man he had once sentenced for manslaughter, now rehabilitated and employed by the court system. 4:30 p.m., June 15, 2024. Priscilla visited her father in prison, sitting across from him with a glass barrier between them. His once commanding presence diminished by prison clothes and the rapid aging that had occurred in just a few months of incarceration. "I didn't raise you to betray family," he said by way of greeting. "You raised me to believe in justice," Priscilla replied evenly. "That's why I had to do this." "She was leaving me," Victor said, as if this justified everything. "Yes. She was leaving you. Not betraying you. Not stealing from you. Just leaving an unhappy marriage. And your response showed exactly why she needed to escape." After Priscilla left, never to return, Betty's social media accounts, now managed by her mother, were transformed into a domestic violence awareness platform. The number of women coming forward with similar stories was staggering. Controlled relationships with powerful men. Fear disguised as protection. Ownership masked as love. What Betty's tragedy revealed was a pattern recognized by thousands of followers. Control is the first step toward violence, and when power meets possession, the results can be deadly. Would you recognize the red flags in a controlling relationship? Have you ever helped someone escape from a dangerous situation? Let us know in the comments below. The truth behind closed doors can only come to light when we have the courage to share it. If this story moved you, help others discover it by sharing this video. Leave a like so others can see this story and gain awareness. And don't forget to subscribe to Guilty Whispers. Together, we can ensure that stories like Betty's are never forgotten and that justice finds its voice no matter how powerful the perpetrator.